Thank you, and welcome to Overtime Pay Regulations 2018. So first, let's talk about what we're going to review today. So first, we're going to talk about recent legislative activity. We have had a lot of legislative activity and then a little bit of a stall. So we're going to talk about that and what we think the future holds in regards to Department of Labor and what's happening with overtime. Then we're going to take a brief review of where we're at today and make sure that we understand what the overtime requirements are today, understanding the difference between exempt and non-exempt. A lot of companies get this confused between your salaried and your hourly and your exempt and non-exempt, and what does all this mean? So we're going to make sure to review that for you. We're going to talk about some overtime concerns, some areas to where you can get yourself in trouble not meaning to. We're going to talk about how to calculate overtime and what the regular rate of pay is and what that means according to the Department of Labor. We're also going to review state overtime requirements. So states have gotten into this game a little bit as well in regards to doing some requirements for if you are performing or paying people within your state. We're going to really understand, especially if you're a multi-state employer, how do you know what state laws you should be following for your employees? You know, this employee maybe works in multiple states, or they live in one state, work in another. How do you know which Department of Labor laws you should follow? And we're going to review that as well. There's also some additional Department of Labor guidance, some best practices that we can review as well, some things that the Department of Labor has given us in regards to the legislative activity. So as you can see, a lot to review in a short period of time, so let's get started. So it all started back in 2014 when President Obama was still in office, when he instructed the Department of Labor to really update overtime coverage. Overtime coverage is one of those things that has a tendency to stall a little bit or get out of date. You know, the last time we had legislative updates in regards to overtime was back when President George Bush was in office, and even then the updates were still kind of small from a perspective when you really think about inflation and how far we've come just in the last, 10 years. Is our legislation really up to date with inflation and how things are going within our country here? So on May 5th, 2015, the Department of Labor then submitted the proposed overtime regulations to the Office of Management and Budget for review. During that time, the Department of Labor also allowed for a comment period till September of 2015. So that's when we got a sense of the first look of what the Department of Labor was looking at doing from a tax, not from a tax, but from a overtime perspective, to really understand several associations like the American Payroll Association and, lots of associations for different types of companies, that may have seen a large impact because of the proposed legislation, made comments during this period. Then it was quiet for a little while. We kind of expected that they were going to take those comments and make some changes to the law before it was actually released. And they did do a couple changes, not as many as I think a lot of us had hoped that they would do. So on May 18th of 2016 is when the Department of Labor released final regulation for these new overtime requirements that President Obama asked them to do. I give you here the legislative number